In Judge Frank Caprio's courtroom, a woman once walked in and immediately started being disrespectful to the judge. She declared loudly, "I will not pay this fine. Do whatever you want." Judge Frank, known for his calm and compassionate nature, gently tried to explain that he could arrange a payment plan to make things easier for her. But the woman rudely repeated, "Do whatever you want, I will not pay anyway." This was one of the rarest moments when Judge Frank Caprio, the man admired across the world for his kindness and empathy, actually felt anger rising in him. Although this heated courtroom incident was never officially published anywhere, Frank Caprio later mentioned it in his book. And what happened after that moment would forever change his life. Welcome back, once again, dear viewers. Who could have imagined that a boy who once shined shoes after school to make ends meet would one day become known as the nicest judge in the world? Looking at Frank Caprio's rulings, filled with smiles, mercy, and generosity, it is hard to imagine how many hidden scars lay behind that cheerful face. Frank Caprio was the Chief Judge of the Providence Municipal Court in Rhode Island. From 1985 until 2023, for 38 long years, he carried the responsibility of justice on his shoulders. His fame spread worldwide through the reality TV show Caught in Providence. His courtroom mostly dealt with traffic violations, cases of wrong parking, speeding, or breaking signals. But instead of treating them as mere offenders, Judge Caprio always tried to solve matters by smiling, joking, and offering kindness. Sometimes, he would even let little children accompanying their parents give the final ruling, filling the courtroom with laughter. Other times he would hug the defendants, sharing their sorrows like a friend. One unforgettable day, a 96-year-old man stood before him, accused of over-speeding in a school zone. When the judge asked, "Why were you speeding?" tears welled up in the old man's eyes. He explained that he was rushing his 63-year-old son to the hospital, who was suffering from blood cancer. Without wasting a second, Judge Caprio dismissed the case, wished the man well, and did not charge a single dollar in fine. Such heartwarming actions did not just win admiration in America, but across the world. Judges from other countries even began to look up to Frank Caprio as their role model. But behind this ever-smiling face lay a painful story, one that pushed him to become who he was destined to be. In 2023, after his retirement, Frank Caprio was diagnosed with cancer. Around the same time, he began writing his book Compassion in the Court, which has now been published in 2025. Within its pages, he shared the story of his grandparents, whose lives planted the seed of compassion deep inside him. His grandparents were uneducated immigrants who had arrived from Italy to Providence City, struggling through extreme poverty. His grandfather survived by selling fruits on a pushcart. One day, after drinking with friends, he got into trouble, and the police arrested him. His grandmother, desperate and helpless, borrowed money from neighbors and went to court to free her husband. Nervously, with broken English and hand gestures, she offered the money in front of the judge. Her young son, who knew a little bit of English, stood beside her. The judge called the boy forward and told him, "Take your parents home. They are free." The boy relayed the message to his mother, and she returned home, showering prayers for the judge who showed kindness. That little boy was none other than Judge Frank Caprio's father, lovingly called Tap. Frank Caprio later wrote, "Even though this case happened long before I was born, the story of that judge's compassion has stayed alive in my family. Whenever I see immigrants in my courtroom, I remember my grandparents and make every effort to ensure they never suffer unnecessary pain." Frank's father's real name was Antonio Caprio Jr., but everyone affectionately called him Tap. When he grew up in America, his family lived in a single small apartment without hot water. 12 people shared one dimly lit room. Tap had to leave school by the 7th grade to help his father, Frank's grandfather, earn for the family. Their situation was so poor that, as Frank wrote, while people joked about having cotton stuffed in their empty pockets, in our pockets there wasn't even cotton. On November 24, 1936, Frank Caprio was born. He lived with his father Tap and his mother Philomena in that same cold, cramped house with no warm water. To take a simple shower, they had to walk miles away. Tap tried setting up several push carts to earn money, but during the Great Depression, none of his businesses survived. Eventually, he got work in milk distribution, and young Frank, from a very early age, began helping him. One time, when Frank was just 8 years old, he was supposed to deliver milk to a wealthy family's home. Ironically, the son of that family was Frank's classmate at school. Early morning, with an empty stomach, Frank carried milk bottles to their doorstep, and when little Frank knocked on the big house's door to deliver milk, the warm smell of toast filled the air. As the door opened, he saw his schoolmate sitting at a breakfast table crying. For a second, Frank thought maybe he would be invited in for breakfast, but instead, he watched his friend's father scold him. Pointing straight at Frank, the man said, "You should be thankful for your luck. Otherwise, you would be out in the snow like this boy, carrying milk bottles." Those words cut deep into young Frank's heart. Even after 80 years, he remembered the sting of that moment so clearly that he wrote it down word for word in his book. Yet despite such painful experiences, Frank never hated his childhood. He always said he was happy because his parents gave him the gift of discipline and dignity. Life was tough. So tough that in winter nights they did not even have a blanket to cover themselves. The milk company gave them just one blanket, and it was meant to keep the milk from freezing. At night, Frank and his brother shared that same blanket. But since it was always smeared with cream, mice came every night to nibble at it, and Frank lay awake in fear. At the age of 16, one evening, Frank's father placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "One day you will become a lawyer. But remember this, never take fees from the poor." By then, Frank was still in high school, balancing his studies with countless part-time jobs. He delivered milk with his father, distributed newspapers, set up pins at a bowling alley, worked as a waiter, and even polished shoes by the roadside to make ends meet. After finishing high school, Frank secured admission into a Providence college. For a family as poor as his, reaching college was a huge achievement. Out of 45 cousins, Frank was only the second one to ever make it that far. In his final year, he applied to Boston Law University, his lifelong dream. But admission there meant quitting all his part-time jobs, and without them, survival was impossible. Though he got accepted, Frank knew his parents could not afford it. So he sacrificed his dream, choosing instead to teach during the day while studying law at a less expensive university at night. During those struggling years, another moment scarred him deeply. One night after returning from law school, a classmate gave him a lift home. When they reached Frank's shabby clapboard apartment, the classmate looked at the house in disgust and said, "If you ever want to be a successful lawyer, you cannot live in a place like this." Frank smiled, said thank you politely, and walked away. But inside, those words burned like fire, and he carried that memory for the rest of his life. Eventually, Frank became a lawyer and even stepped into politics. Once he ran for attorney general. But his opponents destroyed his campaign by spreading false accusations, linking him to organized crime. With his reputation damaged, Frank returned to practicing law quietly. One day, while Frank was having lunch, his phone rang. It was the mayor of Providence. He said, "One of the 3 municipal court judges has been transferred, and now a seat is open." Frank was puzzled why the mayor was telling him this until the mayor added, "I believe you would be perfect for this position." That was one of the happiest moments of Frank's life, not just for him, but for his proud parents, too. Frank Caprio had once been a wrestling champion, and his father Tap never missed any of his matches. In the same way, on the very first day Frank sat on the judge's bench, Tap was there, sitting proudly in the courtroom. The first case that day involved a woman with several $100 parking tickets. She entered the court rudely and snapped at Judge Frank, saying, "I will not pay these fines. I have children to support." Judge Frank kindly offered her a payment plan so she could pay in installments. But the woman kept repeating stubbornly, "I will not pay, no matter what." For the first time, Judge Frank lost his temper. He ordered a boot to be placed on her car and dismissed the case, making it clear that the vehicle would remain unusable until the fines were paid. After the session ended, Tap scolded his son harshly. He said, "How will that woman now take her children to school? How will she buy groceries? You didn't think of that." On the very first day of his judicial career, Frank saw disappointment on his father's face. That moment became the turning point of his life. From then on, Judge Frank decided that before giving any verdict, he would first think about how it might affect the families of those standing before him. Later, he admitted, "My father's scolding taught me what 5 years of law school never could." Soon after, Judge Frank created a donation fund in honor of his mother, calling it the Philomena Fund. This fund helped people who could not afford to pay fines. Then came the show that made him a global icon, Caught in Providence. Behind it was Frank's brother Joe, who loved filming and was always looking for something meaningful to capture. One day, someone suggested recording courtroom proceedings. At first, Frank strongly opposed the idea, but Joe convinced him, and the show began airing on local cable under the name Caught in Providence. Because Frank was a sitting judge, he never accepted a single penny for appearing in the program. Initially, it aired only locally, but when social media arrived, clips spread online, and soon millions around the world were watching. People everywhere admired the way Judge Frank handled cases, with mercy, humor, and compassion. His gentle rulings made him famous as the nicest judge in the world. After serving honorably for 38 years, Judge Frank Caprio retired in January 2023. Just months later, he revealed that he was battling cancer. On August 20th, 2025, he was seen on a hospital bed, asking his fans for prayers in a heartfelt video. And the very next day, on August 21st, 2025, Judge Frank Caprio left this world forever. What he left behind were not just courtroom stories, but timeless lessons of empathy, kindness, justice, and the power of controlling anger. Dear viewers, we hope you enjoyed this story. Do like and share this video, and thank you so much for your warm and loving comments. We will see you again with another inspiring story.